Good evening, BBC Sussex Drive at 5 with Mike, 24 minutes to 6. In a few minutes' time, taking a look forward to some of the bank holiday weekend sporting action. Ahead of that, though, fascinating story. You might not know the name Jack Potter, but it's his heroics as a pilot during the Second World War that are thought to have inspired a character in the recent blockbuster movie Dunkirk. The Spitfire pilot is now being honoured with an area of waterfront being named after him in his native Merseyside town. But his son Rob Potter lives in Outpatch, near to Brighton. We'll hear from Rob in a moment. First, here's military historian Andy Saunders, who knew Jack.
His adventures at Dunkirk in the space of just a few hours are just completely extraordinary. He shoots down German aeroplanes. He then gets shot down himself. He almost drowns. He gets rescued by this French fishing boat. He takes charge of the fishing boat. They try to save a British destroyer. Then they rescue the troops. I mean, it's boy's own stuff, really.
Well, sounds like an extraordinary man. Let's find out more about Jack Potter from his son, Rob. Rob, hi, thanks for joining us on BBC Sussex.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, before we hear about your father's heroics, what kind of man was he? What was he like as a father?
He was a quiet and unassuming, but a very strong sort of person. Typically of his generation, he didn't big himself up. He didn't talk about his war experiences, although admittedly 4.5 years of them were just eating spuds in German prisoner of war camps. And the only things that he used to talk about really were amusing incidents, things that he thought that we would find funny, especially if they were aimed at himself.
Now, prior to the outbreak of World War II, your father was already in the military, I understand.
He joined the Air Force in 1936, and he learnt to fly on biplanes, and his first fight, and he joined 19 Squadron, which was a fighter squadron, and he spent the next 3 years, or most of the next 3 years, with flying Gloucester Gauntlets and Hawker Furies, both of which were biplanes. And then in I'm not quite exactly sure when, but sort of early 1939, 19 Squadron was the first squadron to be equipped with Spitfires. And you could say that he almost had a practice moment for ditching in the sea, because at the Empire Air Day at Duxford in May of 1939, he had the distinction of crashing his Spitfire in front of the assembled multitude of the British public, which was the first time they'd actually seen the plane publicly.
I think the phrase, "oh no," springs to mind at that point.
Indeed, yes.
So,
in his logbook it says, forced landing competition crashed, and the reason he crashed was he forgot to put the wheels down.
I can see that being a problem.
3 years of biplanes where you didn't have to put the wheels down because they were always down. He obviously had a senior moment.
You know what it is? It's that new technology coming in, planes with wheels that can go up and down. Well, clearly your father survived that experience in order to see out the rest of the war. Have you seen the film Dunkirk, by the way?
I have. I saw it almost 2 weeks ago. So it had been out 2 or 3 weeks before that moment, and I knew nothing about the hoo-ha that was going on in the background. I went with one of my sons up in Lincolnshire where he lives, and we saw the ditching bit, and we looked at each other and, that's a familiar kind of story. And then when I got home a couple of days later, emails saying, BBC want to talk to you, blah, 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 and it just took off from there.
Because it's your father's own experiences in World War II that are very similar to one of the bravery scenes in the film Dunkirk.
Yes, well, my understanding is that my dad was the only Spitfire pilot who came down in the sea and lived. So quite clearly the thing is based on what he did. Differences of detail, he was picked up by a French fishing boat, and the business of going to the beaches at Dunkirk and trying to tow HMS Basilisk off the beach. That's not in the film. But that's what actually happened to him. So what actually happened to him was rather better than the film portrayal.
Let's move the story on to where we're at today, because although you live down here in Sussex, understand close to Brighton, your father spent many years living up in Merseyside, where they are wanting to honour your father in a very special way.
Yes. Well, he was born and bred in Wallasey. His father was a skipper of one of the Mersey ferries, and retired as Commodore of the Mersey Ferry Fleet, apparently. And he came down here after the war. His two brothers also, they ended up in London. But, so he was born and bred and went to school and brought up in Wallasey. And apparently they have a programme of honouring Second World War heroes by naming streets after them. And so he was one of the ones on their list, because I was told by a local councillor that there was something like 35 Battle of Britain pilots came from the Wirral. So they were looking for him, and were looking for us to find out about things. And I think the Dunkirk film just brought everything to a head.
Wonderful! What a story. Have you been given a date for that naming ceremony?
I think it will be about. It will be some months, because it's a bit of esplanade on the front by Wallasey Docks, looking straight across the river at the Library Building. Couldn't ask for a better place. But I think it's something which has to be actually properly put together and concreted and seats put in and stuff like that. So it will probably be towards the end of the year, I think.
Well,
but they're keeping me in touch with it, and I will go up, and if there's a ribbon to cut, I'll cut it.
You'll be there with the scissors, absolutely. What a fascinating story to hear about your father's exploits in World War II, and what a lovely way to bring it bang up to date with your personal story as well. Thanks for your time, and do let us know when that ceremony takes place, as we'd love to have a catch-up with you at the time, and just see how it goes.
Thank you very much.
Take care for now. What a wonderful story to hear about on this Friday before a bank holiday weekend. It's 17 minutes to 6.